Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nadine Ventus, and I'm the Program Manager for the Church Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Thank you for attending today's session, How to Build a Business Plan, which will be given by Leith Martin, the Executive Director of the Church Center. Just a reminder that this event is one of many the Church Center offers and is available to sign up for at Startup Tree. So again, please click back to the Startup Tree and continue to monitor our events so you can join us for many more that we have in the spring semester. I'm now going to hand off to Ms. Marcel Cruzado, the graduate assistant of the Church Center, who will be talking about our upcoming student pitch competition.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. As Nadine said, my name is Marcel, and the Church Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation is sponsoring and co-hosting a virtual pitch competition this semester with UNLV, co-hosting with UNLV DECA and UNLV IMA on April 23rd, 2021 through Remo for 2 tracks. The first is open to all students to compete in, and then all UNLV students. And the second track is open to all Leith student organizations. This is the opportunity to share your unique idea for a product or service and get a chance to win monetary prizes. We will be having a qualifying round, so submitting a video submission and a Google form due on March 22nd at midnight, the Monday right after spring break. And if you are interested in more information, please feel free to email us at entrepreneurship@unlv.edu. I'll put the email in the chat box, and we will email you our slide deck from our information session yesterday with all the details you need to know to participate. But that is all the info that I have to share. So now I will pass it over to the Executive Director of the Church Center, Leith Martin, to get this workshop started.
Marcel, thank you so much. Nadine, thank you. So listen, first of all, I appreciate everybody attending. I think there's lots of information or different things that we can cover on business plans. And in fact, I have a presentation that I'll share with Nadine that she can send out if you were interested in having a copy of it after the event. But there's lots of reasons that people attend these events, right? So one reason is because you're genuinely interested in writing a business plan and you want to learn as much as possible about how to do that. Another reason might be because you need a course credit for a class or for a medallion event or for other reasons. So if you have questions specifically, you can either put it in the chat or unmute your mic and ask the question at any point during the course of this presentation. So at the beginning, if I'm talking and you have a question, you can just unmute your mic and just ask the question. Don't worry. So please do that so I can make sure to answer questions that you may have specifically in regards to business plans. All right, so let me share my screen here. Okay, so one of the things I want to cover in this workshop is specifically what is a business plan. And before I talk what a plan is or go into detail on what a business plan or what's included in a business plan, one of the things I wanted to make sure was clear is that, there might be several reasons that you write a business plan, and those plans may be constructed differently depending on your audience. Okay, so oftentimes we write business plans because we need to raise money. And if you need to raise money, then you need to be able to provide some other people with documentation that make them comfortable that you're capable of executing on a plan. And so you write a business plan so that you can raise money. Most SBA loans or other types of loans will require a business plan before they extend credit. And then general investors often require business plans because they want to make sure that you not only can execute, but it's a well thought out plan. You can defend it in such a way that has some significant substance in terms of execution. And so keep that in mind when you consider the tone or whenever you write your business plan. Keep in mind the purpose of the plan. I mean, if you're going to self-fund the entire business, you might write a business plan simply because you want to make sure that you've thought through every portion of the execution of your plan. So given the fact that there are multiple reasons you write business plans, just consider all of those reasons as you work on your business plan, because your audience will affect the way that you write your plan. All right. So a business plan is basically a roadmap of a roadmap of the business to success. Now, this is the actual dictionary version of the definition. One of the most important things about a business plan is it usually covers some extended period of time, somewhere between 3 to 5 years. And it outlines the roadmap or the route that the company intends to take as it grows and begins to grow revenue. Now, these are the different sections of business plans. Now there are business plans that have sections that aren't included here. For example, there are some business plans that I've seen that actually include a section on intellectual property, especially if intellectual property is really important to your business. There might be lots of information about an intellectual property plan. You might include things like patents and other things actually in the plan itself. So that's an example of some of the things that you might actually see that isn't included on my list here. But I'd say these are the most general and the typical different sections that you would see inside a business plan. Okay, so each one of these sections we'll go through here. The first one is the executive summary. Now, the interesting thing about an executive summary is, it's relatively short. It's a summary of the plan, but the irony is it's actually written last. And the reason it's written last is because you want to have completed all the other sections of your plan before you actually write the summary, obviously for no other reason that you want to make sure that you're summarizing all the important parts of your business plan. Until you've written it, you don't know what all the important parts are, but typically it's written last. The other thing is that it typically includes things like your mission statement, some general company information. It might include location of the business, things like that. It might include major growth highlights. So for example, if you expect the company to grow at 100% year over year, it might include information about that. It would also include the product or service, specifically what are you doing? What is your business? It would include some financial information. So things like how much money are you asking for? If you're trying to raise money and you're raising money from investment, how much money are you asking for? So what is the ask? And then a general summary of the plans in terms of execution. An executive summary is really important. The reality is that the vast majority of people that are going to look at your plan may only read your business plan. May only read your executive summary. And once they read your executive summary, if they find it compelling, they want to learn more, they might actually go into your business plan. It's usually a few pages, no more than a few pages. It should be constructed in such a way that it's compelling enough that people want to actually learn more about your business plan, and then they go on. So for example, if I were to send my business plan to someone, they would more than likely review the executive summary if they were an investor, for example, and then they were really interested, then they might actually go and read the rest of the business plan. Which means that not only is it important because it's compelling that it actually creates interest and allows people to want to read your plan, the truth is that there are lots of mistakes in there. They're going to throw your business plan away, and they're not going to go past the executive summary. So it has to be good. It has to be well written. It has to be full. It has to be clear of grammatical errors and just simple things like that, because it's really important that it is compelling enough that people continue to read your plan. All right. So the next section often is the company description. So this would be the first full section of the business plan. So keep in mind, you would have your executive summary, which would be right in the front. The next section would be the company description. So that would be things like, what does the business do? Maybe in more detail, obviously, than the executive summary. List the marketplace need or the problem. So what problem am I solving as part of this? How will you meet those needs? What customers or segments will you serve? Competitive advantages such as location, personnel, or operations. Those are all the kinds of things that you would include in your company descriptions section of your business plan. Next, you would want to include a section on your market analysis. So, what does the market look like? Give a description of the industry. That would include things like, is the market growing very rapidly? Is it contracting? Is it growing at a relatively normal pace or consistent pace? Is it growing at 5% a year? Is it growing at 10% a year? Is it expected to be 3 times bigger in 5 years? What do those numbers look like? You'd also include information about your target market, right? So who specifically is your customer that you're targeting in terms of your business? What are some unique characteristics of the business? Is it characteristics of the industry, for example? Is it a mature industry? Is it an emerging industry? And then, for example, what is the size of the primary market? Is it $1 billion or $2 billion or $100 billion industry, or just started and it's only a 50 or 60 or $100 million industry? How much market share do you think you can gain? And not necessarily as much as what you think you can gain, because you'll cover some of that in terms of the execution and the financial model. But more specifically, what does the market share look like for the other competitors in the marketplace? Is there one competitor that has 80% of the market? So it's a quasi-monopoly type situation, or is it really fragmented and no one owns more than 5 or 6 or 2 or 3% of the total market? Think also information like pricing and gross margin targets. Like, for example, you may include things like what I expect to charge for my product or service. What do my competitors currently charge? What is the industry normal for gross margin in the industry? You would include things like a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat analysis. So that's a competitive analysis of the market. You'd also include things like regulatory restrictions. So if it was a gaming product, for example, or something that was in the gaming industry, you would include information about the regulatory requirements necessary for you to operate or be successful in that market. The next section you would cover is things like organization and management. So you might include an org chart, so organizational structure. You would include, who's the boss? Who's the CEO? Who's the CFO if you have a CFO? Who's the COO if you have a COO? Who are the different roles of the people that are currently involved in the company? Oftentimes, you might even include ownership information. I have seen companies or individuals that are trying to raise money, but they won't tell you who the other investors are in the company. I'm never comfortable investing in a company or being involved in a company that I don't know who the other investors are. And so typically you would include things like, if some of the employees or the co-founders started the company, what does the cap table look like? Who owns what? Other investors that you may have, who are those investors? And how much of the company do they own? You would include things like management profiles, maybe some bio information about the people involved in the company, what positions they have, what past successes they have. For example, if one of the founders or multiple of the founders have built and sold companies as part of their past, you include that information because obviously it makes the company look much better based on the experience of the individuals that are involved in starting the company. If you have industry specific experience that's extremely relevant to your particular business, for example, if you're starting something in hospitality and you have a lot of experience in hospitality, that industry experience is something that you would want to outline in this section of the business plan. And then finally, if you had a board of directors or a group of board of advisors or things like that, you would want to include that information as well in this section of the business plan. You might include their profiles. You might include their experience. You might include things about quotes or other things that they may have said or allowed you to use as part of the business plan. I think this is one of the most significant opportunities in this industry that I've seen during my 25 years experience in the industry, whatever those things may be. You may want to include that information. This is the section where you really brag about the people that are involved in the organization, what those positions are, what they're doing, and why this team is most likely to be successful in launching this company. All right, so the next section you'd have is things like the service and product section. So here you would go into a great deal of detail about what you're actually doing and what you're actually building. If you are a product-based business, you would include pictures. You would include maybe even if it isn't actually something that's been built in scale, or you just have some prototypes built, you may have pictures of the prototype. If it's something that's even earlier stage than that, you might have drawings of the actual product itself. If you have building a service-based business, you'd be very descriptive. You might include things like, if it's a restaurant or something like that, you might even include menus and specifics about the product or service that you're building. You would also include things like the product life cycle. For example, a lot of technology companies, those technology companies have, lots of different products have product life cycles. But in a technology business, the product life cycle might be very short. And so you would want to include information. This product is will be reasonable and have a market for 18 months. And after that, we'll have version 2, and version 2 will be better in this whatever way as a result that we can continue to grow the business. You would include current, ongoing, and future research and development activity. These are the things that are necessary. in order for us to be successful in executing our first product or executing our second, third, fourth generation product, whatever that may be. And then finally, as I mentioned in the very beginning, if intellectual property is really essential to your company, you might have a whole section on intellectual property. But if not, more than likely you would include that information in here. You might, we'll talk about what goes in the appendix. You might actually put copies of the patent, if you have a patent, in the appendix itself, to show the individuals that are reading your business plan or going through your business plan that actually have been issued or have at least submitted a provisional patent to get started on the intellectual property protection. All right, so the next section is what would be called marketing and sales. So, you know, this is more like really specific. Now, remember we talked about before market information. Well, what I mean on that is more industry type stuff, right? So where does the company as a whole fit into the market or the industry itself? This is really specific information on marketing and sales, on how you as a company are going to execute on a sales strategy in order to gain customers. So what is your growth strategy? Am I going to acquire other companies to grow? Am I going to franchise my operation to grow? Am I going to grow vertically or horizontally in terms of my integration? So for example, I'm growing vertically over time. What I want to do is I'm currently in manufacturing and I want to buy a retail store that I'm going to basically sell my product in. Or if I'm going to grow horizontally, you know, am I going to buy other stores that do similar things to what I do in order to expand my footprint and grow my revenue? Or am I going to take market share? Am I just going to grow the business by getting new customers as opposed to acquisition or franchise or maybe some sort of integration strategy? Also, what are my channels of distribution? Am I going to sell direct to customers on my own website? Am I going to go retail and sell inside a store? Am I going to own that retail store, or I'm going to sell it to a distribution channel that's ultimately going to put it inside their retail store and sell it? Am I an original equipment manufacturer, OEM? Am I going to basically build the product itself and then sell it to other people who will either make it part of a bigger component or they will actually themselves sell it, but I actually won't do the selling to the end user to myself? What's my communication strategy? How am I going to promote my business? What's my advertising strategy? Am I going to use primarily social media? Am I going to use brochures that I hand out outside venues? Am I going to build a huge following on YouTube where I talk about my products or services and help drive people to my website? What am I going to do to communicate with my customer? And then finally, what is my overall sales strategy? Am I going to hire salespeople? Am I going to use agent channels to sell my product? Am I going to ultimately just sell on my own website and I'm going to drive traffic to my website through my communication strategy, which includes whatever that is? This is where you really get into the detail of building your sales team or building your sales strategy for taking your product or service to market. And, you know, let's be honest, ultimately, there's lots of businesses that sound like really great ideas, but if you can't actually acquire customers, then frankly, they're just not relevant. Okay, next thing you want to make sure to do is you always want to include a funding request. You never want your people reading your business plan to wonder what it's going to cost them. And so you always want to include in your business plan what your funding request is. So how much money do I currently have? And based on how much money I have, how much money am I going to need for the next 3 to 5 years? For the money that I'm attempting to raise, for example, if I need to raise $1 million, how am I going to use those funds? So I'm going to take $100,000 and I'm going to use it to hire another person that we need, and that's going to pay for them for the next 18 months. I'm going to take another $200,000 to spend on marketing. I'm going to take another $100,000 to basically move into our new office, whatever those numbers are. You need to make sure that you specify what the use of funds are so that investors become comfortable with what you're pitching to them in terms of your plan, and they know how you're going to spend the money once you raise the money to build a business. And then finally, return to an investor. So I'm an investor. You've written a business plan. You've asked me to invest in the company. What can I expect in terms of return? Are you going to ultimately pay back the money to me in some way through a debt repayment? Do you expect to be acquired? sometime in the future by another company. And in the event that you might be acquired, have a good exit strategy that would create a liquidation opportunity for you. What kind of time frame do you think that is? Who are those people that may potentially acquire you as a company? Or ultimately, are you going to buy me out at some multiple? For example, are you going to buy me out at 3 or 4 times what my original investment was, because you're not actually planning on selling the business, but you need the money to get started? What is that return to the investor? It's pretty important that you at least outline to the investor that you have a plan, even though the investor understands that, plans change, markets change, things happen, execution is different. The investor, it's always important to the investor that you're at least thinking about how your execution strategy will result in some sort of return, and hopefully in a substantial way to me as an investor. All right, so you'd also include financial projections. Now, financial projections are typically somewhere between 3 to 5 years. So if you write a business plan, it should show what you expect the money in the business to look like in a 3 to 5 year period. 3 on the worst case on the short side, 5 years over the long term. And some of that kind of depends on what you've specified as your exit strategy. If you think you're going to be sold or you're going to get out of the business within 3 to 4 years, then maybe you don't do 5 years. But if you think it's going to be 5 years or more before you get some sort of exit strategy, then maybe you extend it out past 3 years and go out to full 5 years. That means that ultimately you're going to need to put together an income statement that will basically be an income statement for those years, however long those years or however long you decide to build a financial model for. What does the income statement look for on some sort of basis over that period of time? The last bullet point on this slide is consider shorter times in the first year. What that basically means is that in the first year, you might actually want to include monthly financial projections. You probably should include monthly financial projections in the first year. And the reason is because, you don't know, then I have a decent understanding what's going to happen a month from now and 2 months from now and 3 months from now. And I can show more specifically what I expect to happen during the course of the first year. And then after the first year, then maybe you do quarterly for the next couple of years. And then maybe at year 4 and 5, because it's far enough out that, if we're being honest, we're not 100% sure how accurate they are that far out, because things can happen in the next 3 years. Then you may show those financial projections on an annual basis as opposed to quarterly or monthly. But that first year, it's not uncommon to see monthly projections on those, at a minimum quarterly, but 1 year is too long for your first year. That needs to be broken up into smaller parts. So you would include income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, source and use of funds. So for example, if you show your cash flow going negative at month 6, then you better show that you're raising money or doing something to basically have enough cash to operate the business. So you have to be able to show where those source and what those use of funds will be that you need to raise in the future, which shows the additional fundraising necessary to grow the business. All right. So this is the appendix. So what am I going to put in my appendix? You're going to put all the stuff in the appendix, obviously, that doesn't really fit in a perfect place somewhere in the business plan itself. And this is kind of things that if someone's really interested in your business plan, they've read your executive summary, they think it's a good idea, they think it's compelling, they think this is something that they might want to be involved in, or maybe it's something they might actually want to invest in. Then they may go to the appendix to find out a lot of the support documentation that you may have outlined in the business plan itself. You may need to include credit information or credit history in regards to you or some of the partners. You might include copies of your resume. You should have covered that some in terms of the organizational structure information in that section, but you might actually include resumes that may have a little more detail than you included in your bio section inside the business plan itself. Oftentimes I see people include things like letter of references. So if you've got the CEO of MGM has written a letter of reference that basically says you as an individual are a rock star, and the opportunity in terms of the business that you have is something that they think is going to be compelling and revolutionize the hospitality industry, and if something's really important to them, and by the way, they want to be your first customer, then great. If they're willing to write a letter of reference, definitely include that information. If you've got access to market studies that provide a lot of credibility to not only your market analysis, but also your financial model, you may want to include this here. There are lots of market research firms. You, as many of you are students, or almost all of you are students, and as students, you have access to databases at the library that provide huge amounts of information about markets. And if you were working for a private company and you had to go buy those market research papers from organizations like Gartner, for example, you know, some of those papers cost a few $1,000s. Some of those market research papers might cost $20,000, $30,000. And as students, you get access to those papers through the library. And so you have information about what the market is and what the market size is. And so because that information is from a really reputable firm that has done lots of these type of research studies on lots of different types of industries over decades, they provide a lot of credibility. So sometimes you may want to include that information in your appendix to show, hey, this is the basis for which I used to determine what my financial model is, and also the basis that I use to actually determine what the industry looked like in terms of the market itself. If you have additional market pictures, you may want to include that information in here. I mean, product pictures, you may want to include that information in here. If you have actual patents, you may want to include your patent. You may want to include any specific licensing or permit that you already have. You may want to include additional legal documentation, for example, and contracts. So for example, if you've got some key employees that your potential investors may want to make sure that are locked up, you may have employee contracts in there. You may have shareholder agreements in there that are already in place between shareholders that are involved in the company. Sometimes you may even include some incorporation information. If there's something unique about the way that you're incorporated or the location you're incorporated, sometimes you may want to include information about that as well. All right. So any questions before I move any further? Everybody good? All right. Now, so these are the reasons why you write business plans. And I mentioned before that you should always keep in mind or always understand who your audience is. All right. So these are the reasons that you would write a business plan. One is because you want to continue testing the feasibility of the opportunity. Now, when you first come up with an idea, you may use certain tools to help determine the market viability or the commercial viability of that idea. You may use things like, some of you may have heard things like a business model canvas. You may go out and do things like customer discovery. You may do initial testing or prototyping or initial market feasibility of a product or service. And it looks like it's going to work, but sometimes a business plan can help you figure out whether or not it's going to work. The reason is you might build a financial model and you might say, hey, there's really not enough money in this business to justify the next 10 years of my life that I'm going to have to do in building this company. The other reason is it actually increases the likelihood that you will succeed. If you've written a business plan, then you've thought about every aspect of the business. You've hopefully identified major concerns that you may have about the business. And as a result of that, you increase the likelihood of this that you're going to succeed for two reasons. One, if it doesn't look like it's going to be successful, then you don't do it. So you don't fail as a result of that. And then the other reason is because you've hopefully identified those potential risks and you've figured out ways to mitigate those risks, which would increase the likelihood that you're going to be successful. You also write a business plan because you have to if you want to raise money. It may be required for financing. If you're going to get a loan, you're going to have a business plan. They're not going to cut you a check for a loan or extend you a line of credit unless you have a business plan. Most investors aren't going to invest in companies that don't have a business plan. There are exceptions to that. It's interesting. I've had people come to me before and say, all right, so I just got a question from Nico. Let me just jump on this. So what is the typical business plan for someone trying to become an internet personality or influencer? So Nico, it depends on how much, once again, if you think about why you write a business plan, the truth is that if you're an influencer or an internet personality, if I'm being honest, you're not a business, right? You're basically building a brand around yourself that allows you to draw in money, but you don't have to necessarily raise money to build the business. For example, you might have to work a part-time job because you have to make some money while you're trying to get enough followers or enough influence in the marketplace so that people will either pay you to be an influencer, or people will watch your content, which via ad revenue on YouTube or something like that will drive revenue towards you. But the reality is that you don't necessarily have to write a business plan for that, because you're not necessarily required outside funding. Unless you've got somebody that's willing to just pay you to try to get the thing off the ground, and hopefully that maybe they get some return in the future. But quite frankly, it probably doesn't require a business plan for something like that. All right, so help identify the future. One of the big advantages of writing a business plan is you hopefully have figured out what the company will look like at the end of year one, or at 6 months, or at 1 month into the business. And so if you can identify that, then you might be able to, if you can identify what it looks like, then you can go back and look at that in the future and help figure out what you did right and what you did wrong. Why are things going better? Why are things going worse? All right, so I'm going to fall back here. I got a message from Nadine. So what are good sources to get market data? Eric asked. Listen, if you go into the library and you just walk up to one of those librarians. In fact, that's something we could actually do if there's genuine interest in information that's available. I have the business librarian at the library. His guy's name is Patrick. I have Patrick come into all my classes and do a presentation on all the resources that are available at the library. There's probably half a dozen databases there that tell you all kinds of information about customers, that tell you all kinds of information about the market size, all of those kind of things. And you can learn, like IBIS World is one, and they're free databases that are available at the library. If you don't know how to find those, you can actually go to the library's website and you can click on market research and you can actually look it up and type in information and you can start to search that way. If you want a more sophisticated approach because you're not really sure how to go and dig around and look, you can walk into the library, set an appointment with one of the librarians, Patrick, for example, and Patrick will sit down with you and go through the sources and show you what you have access to. All right. Let me see. I was going to look and see if there was anything else here in the comments. Good sources of market data. Thanks, Nadine. Okay, so I have a question here. Answer this later. Does it help to be your own accountant, or should you hire another accountant that you do not know personally, particularly for a small business? Listen, I don't think it matters one way or the other in terms of hiring an accountant for your small business. If you know how to do it yourself and you're comfortable in doing that, I know lots of people that do all the bookkeeping services for their small business, and then they hire an accountant once a year to do their tax return. I know some people that are accountants, but their business may be something else that's not related to accountancy, and they do their own. It just depends on what your strength is and what your expertise is. There's not a disadvantage or advantage. One of the advantages is if you do it yourself, you don't have to pay someone else to do it, which means it doesn't cost you much money. All right. But we can see that. Now, Helen, if you want me to answer your question about Gorilla Glue, I'm going to need more info. All right, let's see if I missed something else here. All right, cool. I think we're good there. Okay, so next, you can develop and communicate a course of action. For example, if you write a business plan and you're trying to recruit people or trying to get people to join your company, if you present them with a business plan, then it communicates to your team what you're going to do in terms of execution. All right. So it tells you what your course of action may be. All right. Also, it allows you to identify future financing need. If you build your financial model and you see that your cash flow goes negative in month 6, you better have a plan for what you're going to do in month 6. Are you going to raise additional money, or are you going to change what's happening in the first 6 months so you can extend that out and not need money until month 10, right? So it helps you identify how much money and when you're going to need money in the future. It also outlines strategic exit. So you write in your business plan, as I mentioned before, what is my exit strategy? It helps you figure out what that is or could be, and you can build the business with that in mind. Gain a greater understanding of the market and competition. Goes without saying. It's the whole point of doing a SWOT analysis or a market analysis. It allows you as an individual to get organized. I have a lot of people that call the center and say, hey, I need a business plan written. Can I just, have we got a student that can write one for a class? Now, there's a couple of things that I don't necessarily like about that strategy by individuals who ask that. One is, first of all, unless our student's taking a business plan class, and most of these people want it for free, I usually tell them, you're going to get what you pay for. If you're willing to pay a student to do a good job, then you're going to get a better business plan. If you're just going to beg a student to do something for you, well, they're not motivated to do so, and you're going to get what you pay for. Also, I think it's pretty important that business owners or people who are going to run the business are involved in writing the business plan. I mean, you can't outsource a business plan to someone else and then know how to run the business because you didn't write the business plan. So I think it's important that ultimately you're involved as the owner in writing the business plan, because it allows you to mentally figure out what you're going to do at each stage of the business. And also it allows you to get organized as part of the process. All right. Finally, it helps you confirm the math. If you write a business plan, you go through everything. You make sure that you actually know exactly what you're doing. All right. Next, business plans allow you to foster alignment, which basically means that not only different employees in your company, everyone's on the same page because they've all read the business plan, but it also allows you to foster alignment in terms of your strategy. If I'm building a low-cost supplier of a product, then I'm probably not going to have the highest level of customer support because I can't afford it because I'm trying to do low cost. So it allows you to foster alignment in your strategy throughout the business. Your accounting, your marketing and sales strategy is ultimately going to align with the type of product that you're building. It also provides individual accountability. For example, if you go back and look at your business plan and it says in month 4, we were going to be doing 25,000, 55,000, 150,000 in sales, and you're not, well, then you have to be accountable. You look back and say, well, what did we not do correctly? What did we assume wrong? What do we need to change? And what does that change in terms of our business plan going in the future? Which, more importantly, what does that mean in terms of cash? Am I going to need more cash sooner? Or am I going to need less cash because I'm not growing as quickly as I thought I was? It allows you to establish benchmarks. Year 1, I'm going to do $1 million. Now, can I hit that number or can I not? It proves that you're serious. If you're going to write a business plan, business plans, they might be 15 to 20 pages, but they might be 60 or 70 pages. I've actually seen a business plan that was 250 pages, but it was a medical device, really complicated stuff, lots of science in the business plan. But it proves that you're serious. If you walk in and ask an investor, hey, look, investor, I need $1 million. And look, I had this one page where I wrote down my idea. Can I have $1 million? Elon Musk can do that, but you and I probably can't do that. So we have to have a business plan. We have to walk in and say, look, I'm starting this company. And by the way, here's my big document. I've got 60 pages that say why I can pull this off. So it establishes credibility. It also helps you understand your customer because you've thought about who your customer is, built your marketing strategy. I mentioned already, you may actually use a document like a business plan to attract talent, potential employees, because they believe that you can pull it off and they've read your business plan. It allows you to reposition an existing business. I've seen people take existing businesses, write a business plan for the existing business and make changes so that they can actually repurpose the business over time. Identify future hiring needs and timing. Business plan will tell you, when do I need a new salesperson? When do I need another accountant? And by the way, if I'm going to need one in month 10, then in 2 months before, in month 8, I need to probably place an ad to hire a new person because it might take 60 days to have someone on staff. It might also identify new opportunities and might prioritize also what's most important about the business. All right, so here's the things that you should not do when writing a business plan. First, if it's poorly written, you're going to fail ultimately in terms of the purpose of the plan. If the plan is poorly written, but you've just written it for yourself and you're going to put all the money in to start the company, okay, I guess it's less important that it's poorly written as long as you understand exactly what you're doing. But if you're expecting other people to give you the money and it's a really bad business plan in terms of the way that it's written, then they're not going to have confidence. in your ability to pull that off because, oh, by the way, the business plan looks terrible. Sloppy presentation, simple things like images aren't good. The alignment of the pages aren't right. The numbering is wrong, just sloppy presentation. Incomplete. In other words, don't send someone an incomplete business plan without specifying it's incomplete. If you're sending it to someone for feedback, great. Send them an incomplete business plan. If you're sending someone a business plan that you expect them to fund, it better not be incomplete. Making it too vague or too detailed. Now, there's a fine line between the two. Sometimes people don't provide enough information in the business plan. Sometimes people put everything in there and it's more information than people need to know. Setting unrealistic expectations, right? So in year one, you're going to go from 0 to 250 million in revenue. Now that could be possible depending on the kind of business, but make sure that your expectations that you set are realistic because you've given people the business plan and it says what's going to happen. And at some point in the future, people are going to call you back and say, hey, look, I gave you $1 million last year to start your company. And it says that at the end of year one, you're going to be doing $12 million. And you only did 500,000. Well, look, I don't have any confidence. And so my point is make sure that your expectations that you set are realistic. You don't do enough research. Make sure that you know your product, your service, your industry very, very well. The worst thing you can do is send someone with a business plan that has all this information in it. And it turns out in 5 minutes, they open up Google and find something that's exactly, you say no one does what I'm proposing, and they find 2 competitors in the first 2 pages of Google search. Being too optimistic sometimes can be a negative thing. If it's a can't miss, no way it can fail, those kind of things, just be careful with those kind of comments. Saying there's no competition, as I mentioned before, I've seen people say no one is doing what we're doing, and an investor on their phone in the pitch finds a competing product within the first 5 minutes. Cash flow mistakes or financial casualness. If someone finds a mistake in your financial model, they're going to be uncomfortable with the quality of the plan and your ability to execute. Not adjusting a template to suit your needs. There are lots of templates online that you can use to write your business plan, and some of them are really, really good. And I encourage you to do that. I don't think you should basically start from scratch. I think you should use those things. But sometimes I see people that leave a section in there that they don't need, and they fill out some information in there because they feel like they need it, but it's not really relevant to their plan. Make adjustments to that template based on what you really need. And then finally, showing the hockey stick model in your financial model. Yeah, we all have seen that, right? It starts out kind of flat and then goes like this in terms of your sales or revenue. Just be careful that you're not only over optimistic, but that you haven't missed your financials. All right, so Ariana, so how do you predict the outcomes of the future as accurately as possible? Okay. And this is something, Ariana, that a lot of people struggle with. This isn't just a question that you would ask. Some people are like, well, how do I know what my revenue is going to be in year 4 or 5 or even in month 4? Well, what you have to do is you have to start at a very, very basic level in for example, day 1 or month 1. And you say, okay, I can get, based on my previous experience or my initial investigation, I can get 4 new customers per month. And those 4 customers are going to count for X amount of revenue. And then if I can get 4 customers that will pay me this, then the next month, because now I've brought in some help, because I raised some money, now I've got an extra salesperson, then that person should be able to bring in 4, and then I can bring in 4. But also because we're actually better at it, I think we can do better than 4. I think we can bring in 5 new customers. Whatever those numbers are, depending on what your industry is or what kind of business you are, you pretty much have to start at a pretty basic level and really think about what I think I can accomplish in a relatively short period of time in the beginning. And then you just use those metrics to build over the course of time. Your investor knows that your projections at year 4 probably aren't right. He knows that, or she knows that. But the truth is, it's expected that you at least make an attempt to do the best you can do to predict what you're going to be doing in year 4 or year 5. And how do you differentiate poor performance from bad predictors? It's a great question. And I think that's why it's important to keep going back to the business plan. You could have basically at month 6, you go back and look at your business plan and say, I'm off by 50%. Why am I off? Do I need to reevaluate my assumptions? Or did I just basically screw up and didn't accomplish as much as I thought I would? Most investors will look at a business and they'll say, okay, if this business does half as much revenue as they predict that they will do, is it still a valid business? And because they have an expectation that even though you think that you're being conservative, they still have an expectation that it's going to be harder than you think it is. And so they're more than likely going to discount it by some metric, because they don't think you'll be able to deliver that, because, you know, there's things going to come up that you're not aware of. So, you know, is it bad predictors or bad performance? It could be a combination of both. That's why you constantly have to go back and reevaluate. And, you know, what happens in month 4 in reality could have been different than what you predicted. And then as a result of that, that could affect month 12 or month 24. And so you have to look and see how that's going to affect you going forward as well. All right. So Maria asked, market research, most sources should be free, but is there a specific source website list that is paid that you can recommend? Listen, there's the two ways I would answer that question, Marie. One is you can go there. A lot of the free sources will be okay, meaning that you'll be able to get a fair amount of information. And that's just, quite frankly, you just Google something and you find some information on that, and you'll see that there's be some Wikipedia pages that have quite a bit of information if you want things like that. But the truth is that if you really want some really in-depth analysis, then you're going to have to go to some of the big market research firms. And as a student, you have access to those as free. Even when you graduate, I think UNLV has 2 public terminals at the Leith library. I remember Patrick telling me this one time. And if you're a member of the community or you've graduated, you can come back and use those 2 public terminals, and you can actually get access to most of the market research that way as well. So it's really, really slick. Free versus paid, I will say that the paid databases that I've seen at the library are unbelievable. If you wanted to find out how big the pet industry was, or more specifically, how big the pet food industry is, it would tell you how big the pet food industry is, who the biggest players are, what the market share each one of them has, what percentage, what is their gross margin in the industry. It will tell you everything. So I guess my point is that you can always Google it and you can come up with some decent information. But what I would do is I would leverage, if you're a student, I would leverage the access to resources that you have. And once you graduate, I would leverage as many free sources of information as you could through things like the UNLV library. Now, the library pays millions of dollars every year in subscription fees to databases, research magazines, all these other things that we use as part of the university environment. And you should definitely leverage that if you're a community member or alumni in the future, to try to figure out or to try to gain access to the best information possible. Because keep in mind, there are companies that pay tens of thousands of dollars for the same information that you're going to get from the library. All right. Ariana said, for small business that aren't necessarily trying to expand much over the few years, get a big loan or anything, would you hold off on writing a business plan and see where the business is going first? Then once you're ready to expand, then write a business plan for that. Something you would write before starting a business regardless. All right, so this is a good question. If this is something that you're not going to have a great deal of risk on, for example, if you're going to buy $500 worth of, I don't know, widgets from a Chinese manufacturer, you're going to ship them to the US, and you're going to put them on a website or try to sell them on Facebook, probably don't write a business plan, right? There's not any risk. If you don't sell any of them, you're out $500, right? And maybe if they really start to sell well, then you try to figure out, okay, do I need access to a warehouse? Do I need to raise some money to do that? Do I need to get a loan so I can buy a lot more inventory based on how? Then maybe you write a business plan for that, right? Or maybe you decide that you're going to franchise your operation, you're going to expand, those kind of things. And maybe you do. This is more along the lines of, remember I said, why would you write a business plan? The first thing you would do it for is because you need to raise money. Well, if you don't need to raise any money, then maybe you don't need a business plan. The second reason you do it is because you as an individual need to understand the market, because either you're going to finance it personally or because you're just not exactly sure what the potential of the market is. Okay, then you write a business plan because you want to make sure you understand all of that. If you're tinkering with something and you're like, well, I'll just order some stuff and I'll see if I'll sell it. Heck no, don't write a business plan. It's a lot of work. But if you actually are something, it's something that's going to scale and you think is relevant and you think can grow into something substantial, then you probably should write a business plan. All right, continuation of what not to do. Not identifying the problem, which basically means that you didn't say the problem that you're solving at some point in your business plan. I've seen people read business plans and at the end turn to the company and say, now what do you do? That's a disaster, right? Ignoring current or future threats or risk. I've seen companies stand up and say, hey, we've got a product that basically will let people be safe in a crosswalk by notifying cars that people are in the crosswalk. And I've heard someone at a pitch say, well, what about autonomous cars? We don't really worry about that because that's so far off, it doesn't matter. Well, it could be the next 3 or 4 years. So my point is that don't ignore future risks or threats to whatever you're working on. Not outlining your assumptions and financials. If you have to make assumptions in order to build those financial statements, specify what they are. Hopefully they're valid. Not revising or continuing to refer to it. So one of the mistakes people make is they write a business plan, they stick it in the drawer, and they never look at it again. You should look at it a lot. You should figure out whether or not you were right. And if you weren't right, based on what you've seen, how should it be adjusted? So maybe you should continue to revise it based on what you've learned, because that may affect cash flow. It may affect your strategy in the future. Don't finish a bad plan. If it's obvious this thing's not going to work, don't write the whole thing just to prove it's not going to work. Throw it in the trash and move on with your life. Skipping around, basically this means, not finishing sections or doing other things. Sometimes it becomes a little bit choppy in the way that you do it. Don't make it too long or too short, depending on the kind of business it is. If it's relatively simple, maybe 10 or 12 pages. If it's pretty complicated, more than likely it's going to be 25 or 30. If it's really complicated, it might be 100. But make sure you cover the material adequately. Some people don't put in there how much money they're raising. Usually a mistake. If you want people to send you money, you want them to know while they're reading business plan how much money you want to raise. Ignore or not asking for outside opinions. And then finally, not identifying individual weaknesses, meaning if you know you have a weakness, then you build a team that's better. Being too aggressive or too overconfident sometimes is a mistake. And then finally, ignoring the need to write a business plan is a mistake, especially if you're building a business that you think is going to be substantial enough that you need to actually put together funding or other things. All right. So Eric, you sent me a message that there's some way that UNLV can look through my business plan. If you reach out to me, I'll take a look at it for you. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish with it. If you want to move past that, and depending on what kind of funding you need, there's always the Small Business Development Center. You can find them online, SBDC, Nevada SBDC. There's quite a few, I don't know, half a dozen UNLV employees that work for Small Business Development Center that help people who are working on starting a small business. So those are the kind of places that you can do as well. So, all right. So Maria, talk about customer acquisition. How is it calculated for the restaurant industry? Well, listen, I think the good thing about the restaurant industry is it's been around for so long that you should be able to find some pretty valid information online as to what the customer acquisition cost for different types of industries. So for example, if you're a fast food type product, I suspect there's probably some details about customer acquisition cost on that as well. If you're talking about casual dining or high-end dining, there's probably some general information about that. The great thing about the restaurant industry is there have been millions have started, millions have failed, and millions have been successful. And so you can do lots of different, there's lots of information about restaurants online that you can do. I don't know exactly what the customer acquisition costs are because it depends on what industry or what vertical you're in. And to be totally honest, I don't know a lot about opening restaurants. It's just not something I spend a great deal of time. All right. let me look here. Quick opinion on Mr. Beast. Listen, Mr. Beast is basically leveraging content creation, which he's done a phenomenal job of, and opening restaurants and other things basically to help diversify and build the brand. I think he's an extreme example of someone who's done a great job of that. Eric, how and where can I find investors? Listen, man, it depends on what kind of business it is. If you're talking about a technology company, then you would engage people that invest in technology businesses. It depends on how compelling it is. Reach out to me on a separate thread, and I'll take a look at it and I'll have a conversation with you about it. How do you find investors for the type of business that you're starting? Example: food, beverage, hospitality, catering. Listen, there aren't a ton of investors that invest in food, hospitality, beverage, food, beverage. Why? Because it doesn't really provide them a great deal of return most of the time. And then also, quite frankly, if you want to start that kind of business, most often you're going to borrow money from a bank. Because investors, that's not totally true. There are some investors who are willing, especially if they've been in the hospitality industry. So if you're looking for investors who invest in food and beverage, hospitality, and catering, you better find people that have been successful in food, beverage, hospitality, and catering. Because most other people don't know anything about that industry, and they're not going to put any cash in that industry. And a lot of those businesses, especially if it's going to be one or two operations or one location in the beginning, are almost always funded initially internally with your own money or with a bank loan, probably. All right. So somebody specifically mentioned opening ghost kitchens, and I assume you're talking about Mr. Beast. The only thing I know about Mr. Beast is what my teenage kids tell me. And I do know that he's opened a burger joint. I know the ghost kitchens are a pretty big deal, but that's just a market trend, right? There's lots of ghost kitchens opening because the truth is that people are doing a lot more dining and picking up things at home. The ghost kitchen is a burger joint, yeah. So I think the reality is the guy's done phenomenal in creating a great deal of cash flow by doing stuff online, and then he's leveraging that in a way to hopefully be able to do better over the long term. All right, so let me kick out of this. All right, so we've got 2 minutes left. If anybody else has any questions, throw it in the chat right now. If not, I'll throw it to Nadine. Nadine, do you have any announcements to make or anything at the end?
Yeah, so what's going to happen is after this session, I've recorded all the attendees. So for medallion students, I'll be sending this information to the medallion program to confirm that you attended the event. Also, all the attendees will be added to the Troche Center Canvas page. The reason for that is through the Canvas page, you get access to this recording. And also we'll be sending out separately the emails for the PowerPoint as well. So we'll email you the PowerPoint presentation, and this recording will be added to our Troche Center Canvas page. And I'll add all of you to that Canvas page. There are actually numerous events on that Canvas page for Troche. We actually have a workshop on graphic design, wearable marketing. So take a look and explore also all the resources we have on our Troche Canvas page, which will be added to.
Great. Thanks, Nadine. Okay, so one more quick question. Nico asked, do you encourage competing in a pitch competition as practice? I think the truth is the more you get opportunity to practice, the better off you are, right? So whether or not you're selected to pitch may depend on what the theme is for the pitch competition. There's lots of different variables that go into that. But the truth is that anytime you get a chance to practice a pitch, you're always rewarded for that. So that's my response there. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you guys on campus, hopefully in person in the fall. And if you need anything else, reach out. Happy to help.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.